Hello, everyone. We have an incredible guest. Akshay Ranganath and I used to work at Akamai together. He's now with a startup called Cloudinary as a principal architect. And I think, Akshay, ever since I've met you, you've had an incredible ability to take something so complex that no one can make sense of it and then break it down into simple steps that everyone understands it. I think that's your incredible strength and skill. And so I'm excited to have you as part of the Chat About AI podcast so we can learn from you how you take AI and just like break it down so we can all learn in steps. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey in learning artificial intelligence and some of the concepts.
Sure. Thank you for the great introduction. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I work as a principal solution architect at Cloudinary, and there are a lot of use cases where customers came up with something related to AI, and then I realized I didn't understand what they were asking, and that's how my journey started. It got even worse. Like I attended one of the reinvents, and I didn't understand any of the talk. And then I made a decision saying I have to learn, and I kind of aimed high. I started with a course from MIT on deep learning. Although the course was amazing, I didn't understand. So I took a step back and I said, I have to start from the foundation. I work with Python, so there was this book on learning machine learning with Python, make it learn, and so on. So I just focused on that single book, and I said, I'll go cover to cover, and then pick it up from there. So that's how I started.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And now you're actually on LinkedIn writing newsletters about AI. And I read a lot of your work. Your current application is really around images and kind of generative AI features around images. Can you, at a high level, just kind of maybe take us through like what does it mean now that we can have large language models process images, right? What does that mean for us and what can we how can we take advantage of it?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, Cloudinary, we are into media asset management, delivery, optimization. So as part of the management piece, what happens is a lot of our customers bring in, like let's say e-commerce assets and so on that have existed for years together and they don't have any metadata. So you cannot really search. And one of the challenges is just looking at the image and identifying what is there. There are solutions out there which can do generic things. Given an image, it'll say something like hat, t-shirt, water bottle. That's not what our customers want. What they really want is something like this is something like a dry fit specific t-shirt. This is a brand name water bottle and so on. So that is where the extra training comes in. That is something that we are focusing on. So a lot of them are classification problems, saying that, hey, given an image, how do I categorize based on my industry? The other ones that we have seen are Gen AI in the sense that you have an image and then you want to maybe replace the background or change the color of something, things like that, without really tampering with the actual product. Because the problem is if you change the product, then your returns will spike. So there is a real world business impact of missing with Gen AI. So that's something that we are focusing on as well.
That's super interesting. You know, one of the things, my personal application is like, I never know if clothes are going to fit me. And so I was thinking, I need like e-commerce application, right? I wish someone would take my avatar and like, okay, you buy this dress in this color with these shoes. Here you go, right? That's always the hardest thing for me is like picking those items. Like, then you get the dress, then you don't like it, then you send it back, then you try something else. It's a lot of trial and error, I feel like, in the shopping process. And so I'm always like, okay, people are like, well, go get a makeover artist. You can go to Macy's and they'll get you a personal shopper and they'll try things on for you. But half the time, I feel like sometimes with humans, they bring their human interests into it, right? Like they're like, oh, I like this brand, so I'm going to let this lady try on the brand I like. And you're like, this is not for me. So I wonder if AI could solve that better, right? Be like, maybe this is the right brand for this lady with this color, with this type of pattern. And, I don't know. That's what I would love.
Yeah, no, it keeps coming up. It's an interesting problem to solve. A lot of people are trying. So let's see who gets it right.
Let's see who gets there first,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
let me know if you hear of a great application here. I'll be the customer for it. So as we look at ways that like generative AI transforms, not just like text, we talked a lot about people talk to ChatGPT all the time, right? They now can update their photos, right? I've used literally The other day, I used, what is it, Nano Banana, the Gemini model, right? To update my LinkedIn photo. And I was like, make me look good. And I'm like, it's not editing me the right way. I still look kind of older. I wanted it to be like a different person. So as we look into, how pictures are being, to your point, modified, and you pointed a lot into the fact that you don't want to modify the original product too much. Like, you want that t-shirt to look like the t-shirt that originally was there. You don't want to modify it to be some other t-shirt that someone's trying to purchase. How do you ensure that authenticity using AI?
So there are a bunch of effort in progress on that. So there is this concept called C2PA.
Okay.
So that is going on. So what that is trying to do is saying that, hey, given an image, maintain a history of all the changes. It's almost like you have the forensics, you have like a chain of evidence which says that this thing was handled by this person, this is a timestamp, and so on. Same way for an image, like if I do a resize, it'll record that timestamp. If I do something else, it'll record. So basically you have a whole chain saying all the things that changed in that image, so the person receiving it can actually go back and verify. It's still an effort in progress. The way it is implemented, someone in the middle can just basically remove that metadata and share it out. So you'll never know. So as long as you kind of, every downstream system, if they insist saying, I want the chain of evidence, basically the C2PA metadata, it should work. But yeah, it is an effort in progress.
Yeah, I'm actually taking a course at Cornell about deepfakes, and they talked about that framework and the fact that, like, do we have to use blockchain essentially to verify that authenticity, at least in the case that they were presenting. But to me, it's like it's an overhead, right? So, like, how do you see that from you used to be at Akamai performance architect. I remember that. How do you see that from performance impact, right? That reading that metadata and reading that, picture could have been modified, I don't know, hundreds of times.
There is definitely an impact on size and performance, but the way I see it, it's kind of on the publisher, may or may not be necessarily on the consumer. So
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, let's say you're a news organization and you are receiving some assets and you want to make sure that it is actually authentic. Literally, the cameraman took that snap and did some basic editing and gave you the original. That's it. No other changes in the program during the process. If that is if that's something that you want to verify, this will help. But yeah, if you want to actually share it back to the end consumer, may or may not work.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's different applications, right? Or, like, do you see watermarking becoming more of an application for direct consumer? Or I'm just what's your prediction if you were to pick a way?
So I think anything to do with prediction or classifying, as in like a AI model that takes an image and says whether it's real or fake. These are all like whack-a-mole solutions.
Yeah,
It'll work for some time, and then there is a model which will do better and then kind of break it.
right.
So I don't know if any of these things will really work. But at the end of it, I think it's just like how most of the protocols evolve, wherein everyone says that this is how we will do the work. So that means if I generate, I will also embed these additional metadata saying that this is actually a Gen AI created. I think most of them already do. So if you look at the EXIF, there's something called EXIF metadata in the image.
Okay.
If you look at it, it already has information saying this image was created, let's say, by Grok, by Gemini, and so on. So it
Interesting.
is there.
So there is tracking already available if
Hmm.
someone looks for it.
Yep.
You talked a little bit about frameworks. You mentioned that. And I think when the complexity, this whack-a-mole kind of scenario, persists, we crave a framework to help us kind of organize the information. Are there frameworks that you're currently learning or looking at that help with this?
Sure. I think what I realized is, at least when you start trying to start with AI, the challenge you face is there are too many things, too many people talking about various different aspects of AI. It gets hard. So the way I kind of did was get some fundamentals and then focus on whatever works for you. Think of it like the JavaScript framework wars that happened like a few years back. Every day there's a new framework, and then you're kind of drowned and worried that, like, hey, am I falling behind because I didn't learn this XYZ framework? Whereas what really matters is your company uses this specific framework. That's all that matters. Same way, let's say you are an AWS org and the only thing you have access to is essentially Bedrock. And within Bedrock, maybe whatever models are available and so on. So as long as you're able to work to that framework and get your workflow, I think that is more important than trying to figure out like whether one specific model or one specific thing will work for you. Yeah, that's my understanding, or that's the way I look at it. And ultimately, if you work through this framework, changing the actual model is literally like a single line of code. So
which
you
is
don't have
incredible,
to,
right?
yeah,
That's not really the model is not the decision point, or not the critical decision point because you can update it. What the sounds like what you're saying, the critical decision point is really the workflow. What problem are you trying to solve, and how are you getting to solve that problem? Having that domain knowledge about the problem you're solving.
yeah, that's exactly it.
So, do you see? I mean, you and I have been in tech for many years, right? The thing we I think both love about it, I'm assuming you do as well, is that it changes all the time. Like today you know something, tomorrow it changes and we learn something new. The learning process is just constant. That you can never say you're an expert because as soon as you are, new technology comes out that you need to learn and you're like a novice, right? Just
True.
kind of with AI. How do you see that progressing? Like there's so many people that we hear so much noise, right? It's oh, AI is going to take your job. Nobody needs a coder anymore. Like what do you see happening in our industry in terms of how do we keep up with it? How do we keep learning?
Sure. So there was this very interesting talk called AI Snake Oil.
Uh-huh.
I think it's by a professor at Princeton. And he said, like, as long as you think of a technology as technology itself, it's a novelty. It becomes a real use technology if you don't even think about it. So he was trying to say something like spell correction, right? It is actually AI. We don't think of it as AI. I mean, it's
Right.
machine learning, but we don't think of it that way. It's just spell correct, right? Same
Yeah.
way, I think last 3, 4 months I've been using Cursor for coding, and it's come down to a point where like I don't really think now, like, I have to go write a whatever query and then get the code back. Is just a process. So I think that's how we are going to evolve. Like within a few months we'll get so used to it that we'll not even think about it, saying that this is a technology. So that's one aspect. Now in terms of not even getting a coder because AI is going to solve everything, I don't know. I mean, I find that a little hard to believe right away, maybe because I'm so used to working with very complex code base. But I do see one thing. So as you start working directly with this method, there is one risk, which is I found myself with this risk once, which is you ask the AI, it generates the code, you blindly copy it and deploy it without really understanding. And when it breaks, it becomes a problem because imagine this, you have a production bug and you don't know what the code was because you had never seen it, you have never really understood it, and now you have to fix it. And when that occurs, I think it's a challenge, especially if there is a monetary impact, because there is pressure to fix it and we are not really very clear on what caused the issue.
Interesting.
I think that is something that is going to become a challenge. So there will be some guardrails put in place, I'm sure, saying that even if you generate using AI, there has to be someone who either understands or there is another AI which can actually really troubleshoot it. And the challenge becomes worse if you have code that you are kind of using something new. For example, there's a lot of talk around agentic, workflows.
Right.
Most of these frameworks are evolving, so the documentation changes like overnight. GPTs are not able to catch up. And even if you say like, give it tools like search across whatever, sources, it still fails sometimes, actually a lot of times. So it becomes a judgment call saying that, this thing that someone is discussing may probably work for me and I have to try it out. The GPTs don't get that, and you may actually end up in trouble. I think going back, I think if you're using a technology that's been around and then you ask LLM, it'll do a great job. But if you're working with some new framework, your mileage may vary.
I love how you just have an incredible way of breaking things down. It's so important. We can jump in on this and say, okay, no more developers. We're just going to have AI code that. The issue also is like the boundaries that you mentioned, right? It could fix that piece of code, or it could fix things that you don't want it to fix. Like all of a sudden, your code is being rewritten in another language that you don't want it, and with other solutions, and all of a sudden you have production issues. where things are being done that were never done before. So frameworks, I know, are so important in terms of how do you manage agents, right? So you'll still need developers probably to kind of manage the agentic workflow. How do you see that evolving? I want to talk about agentic AI because we hear it all the time, like agents everywhere. But what does that mean to you?
Sure. To me, the biggest stumbling block with agentic workflow is it's a new way of writing code or building workflows in the sense that you don't have to put all the conditions. You kind of let the agency reside with the agent
Mhm.
on what needs to be done. It's all, again, like going back, it's literally how it was like, let's say you came from C programming or Python and whatnot, and you had to switch over to, let's say, JavaScript, which is an event driven. It's not easy. You kind of stumble and then you don't know how to use it. The simplest thing that most people would do when coming from Python to, let's say, JavaScript is there's this concept where you can use like await, basically don't do event driven, essentially run it like a normal program. You can do it, but that's not how you should be doing it
Yeah.
from a pure usage. It's somewhat similar with agentic. I can take an agentic framework and build a code that basically is like a regular program. I'm just using agents in it. Sure, it's agentic if you want to call it, but that's not really what it is. I've seen a lot of code that is like this. I think the real agentic code is where you really are able to say that, hey, my agent can make all of these decisions. And I have not seen a lot of use cases where that is really working. Like every time I see, it's like, can you get me the weather, where I don't write the code for getting the weather. Useful, maybe, but I could have just written it like a simple program.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that, I've not seen it really working so much other than the actual tools like Cursor. That is agentic and that works. So that's a real use case. Yeah, I think so that there's challenge in trying to get that right.
It is so hard. And I mean, because sometimes in technology, we're doing technology for technology's sake, right? Like we choose a technology, we learn a new technology, not necessarily because the business needs it, but because, hey, we want to learn JavaScript now, right? Because that's the new, or Python. And so we rewrite it, but we rewrite it using the old framework that we used. So we're taking that same concept, it sounds like, to agentic AI, where we're trying to pull the use cases together based on our previous experience, but not really truly using the strength of the framework and the ability of why the agents are there. Can you think of any other use cases that would be interesting for agentic AI?
Sure. I think some of the power of agentic AI is complex troubleshooting. Like, let's say you have an on-call that fires,
Yeah.
and then you have to analyze what is going on. And there may be multiple things you have to check at once. And I think this is where an agentic framework could help because, like, let's say there are 5 things that can fail. As a human, I can only check one thing at a time. Or a regular programming code also more or less would do something like that. Whereas with agentic, I can say, like, go check all these things and then come back and report. And based on that, I can take a decision.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is something that may be interesting. The other ones I've seen are, like where you want to kind of avoid hallucination. That's something I don't know if it'll work. I have a feeling that maybe it is getting there. So what you do is like you actually have agents which are, one of them is, let's say, the creator, one of them is like, let's say, a researcher, and a third one which is like an editor, which is checking back on what everybody else did. And then given the right criteria, this one can kind of check the others and say that, okay, I will not let any hallucination get through. So maybe that is some one way of agentic evolving.
I love that. I mean, because you can't be in all places at all time. You're right. It's just like, how do you get the information? But at the end of the day, you are responsible for the final decision, right? It's not the agent that's making the final decision. It's you are who are making the final decision that this is the direction which you want to continue. So you're still, it sounds like a big proponent of like human in the middle. Like it's great that we have all this AI agentic stuff, but we still need to be kind of watching it to make sure it doesn't run amok a little bit, right?
I mean, the way I see it is this. Let's say you have an agentic or a fully AI-based system in place and it makes some mistake. For example, let's say you're a ticket booking website and it has made wrong booking and the customer asks for a refund. Now, are you going to blame the AI or are you going to blame the organization?
Right.
At the end of it, it's the org that has to pay. If you want to have that, then maybe you need some human in the loop to say that, hey, like I take responsibility for this action. And if something goes wrong, like I am the one who is responsible, not the AI. Like that is where I think I'm confused. Like all the talk of AI kind of taking over stuff, sure, but then if when some things go wrong, who's going to be blamed? Like you can't blame an entity and like AI and say that is what caused it. And then what? Like sure, it may have caused it, then what's the next step? I think there was a use case, some service center in some airline, I think they had like an agentic chatbot which promised a refund and they couldn't go back because it's a chicken and egg problem. If you say that we cannot process the refund as the agent got it wrong, then the customers will sue the company saying that it's wrong information. And if they pay the money, then they're kind of agreeing that the agent is right even though the policy was something else. So either ways they're kind of losing. So how do you control that?
It's incredibly hard. I mean, I think there was also a use case of like Chevy being sold for $1, right? Like the agent can be saying, "Yes, of course, here you go. Here's a nice Chevy truck for $1 only," which is obviously not a good thing for the Chevy business, right? Model. So you do need to, and I think there's policy that's coming to fruition where you're right, like it's the business that's responsible for it. Unfortunately, the laws take a little while to catch up to technology. So we might see, a delay there. We already do. But at the end of the day, like you're responsible. I read an article about doctors, like radiologists using AI for scans. And what they're found in the study is that because doctors came to so heavily rely on AI, they've actually started missing more things because they're like, oh, they've gotten so many answers that maybe where psychologically they were like what they would do, that they just stopped using critical thinking to say, okay, is this really the right answer? So do you see some of that happening in your experience that we're just going to be like, oh, well, AI said this, so it must be right?
Yeah, that's definitely a fear. And it has happened, I think, already. I think in my own case, I was trying to write a code to integrate with some new system. And normally I would have put in the effort to actually go look at the docs, look at what are the APIs and so on. I just went to ChatGPT and said, like, generate the code for me. It did. It kind of worked. And then I just deployed it. Like, there's no attachment and there's no understanding.
Right,
So if, later on someone asked me, like, okay, if I have to change this, how do I do? I'm like, I don't know. I have to ask ChatGPT.
right. Ask
Um,
AI.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's the hardship, right? Is that like where is that line where we get the productivity gains without losing our own critical thinking and ability to, you know, code or make decisions that are valuable. So it's definitely a tough one. You're great at learning. You're always picking up new things. Tell us a little more about what you're learning now. What are some sources of information that we should all check out when it comes to learning about AI?
sure. So I use Twitter for picking up whatever is the latest.
Mhm.
So I generally follow a bunch of people there.
Okay.
For long or in-depth learning, most of the times it's YouTube.
Okay.
Because a lot of videos get posted there. The other source that I've also used is Deep Learning AI. It's Andrew Ng's website. A lot of free
Yes. So
courses
much good
available there.
classes there, right?
Yeah, so
And they're
that's
always coming up with new ones, it seems like.
yeah, that's so true. So I think these are my main sources. But
So subscribe to the Chat About AI channel, right? On YouTube.
of course, yes.
What about Twitter or other YouTube channels? Tell us more specifically, who do you follow?
So on YouTube, there's this person called Matthew Brennan.
Okay.
He posts stuff on generally the AI latest news.
Okay.
And the other person, I forget the name, he was one of the co-developers of Olama.
Okay.
So he generally posts a lot of stuff on using LLMs for local use. So within your machine, or for example, given a model, how do you convert it to or convert it to a format that Olama can support and things like that. So that's the other person that I normally follow.
Okay.
These are on YouTube. On Twitter, there's Andres Karpathy, obviously for all his cool stuff. And then most of the times it's like Twitter actually recommends based on my usage, I guess, saying, hey, this is something that may be interesting.
Nice. Right.
So that's how I get to stuff. Sometimes what I also do is there are these documents published by Anthropic or even OpenAI on how they ran the tests and what are the issues they saw. So those documents are also very interesting, not necessarily from the model capability, but how the models are evolving. Now, these are the hairy problems where, for example, Anthropic came up saying that in one instance, they found that the model is actually figuring out that it is in the test mode versus deployment mode. So in the test mode, it's almost like how you're taking a driving test where you follow all the rules because you know you're taking the test, and when you actually drive, you're like, I don't know, I'm never
You're
going to use my
speeding and going
indicators.
through
Yeah,
stop sign, right? Yeah.
right. So I think it's so those kind of things they publish. So that is actually very interesting to me. So I generally try to read up on that.
That's interesting. So, do you suggest when you write a prompt for Anthropic models, you or Claude, you're just essentially saying, "Hey, you're in test mode," and that's going to actually give you a better outcome? Is there a way to use that data to modify your prompting?
Well, I think you're not too far from truth.
Yeah,
Actually, there is I forgot another channel that I follow is called Future IQ. This one, it's got nothing to do with AI directly. It's mostly around psychology, and they had a very interesting talk on how the behavior of AI is very similar to behavior of the employee-employer relationship.
yeah,
If like it's literally like you go to a chat and ask a question, it'll give you a quick answer. Most of the times it's very generic and wrong. And then you push back and you say like, hey, you can do better. This is not, think hard enough. And it gives you a better answer. So their argument was like, literally you have to be like a strict boss saying that I will not take your first response and I'm going to push you hard until you give me the things I want. And they said like over time, people working with AI have to evolve not as just users, but they have to start considering themselves more like a boss, an employer, and the LLM is mostly like the employee, where they have to make sure that it gives you the performance that you're looking for. Just like how employees are humans, every person is different. So every model may have a different way of working with you, and you need to know that, and you have to kind of
adjust
work
your
with it in that
style.
way. Yes.
Interesting. So I wonder if there are like hints that I would love that in your next blog is hints on how to use all the models and how you should communicate and adjust your style to Claude versus ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that. That would be interesting to see because you're right. They do have their own strengths. Like I know for Claude, I always use it for writing. I think it's incredible for writing. But ChatGPT is great at building financial models. So if there's like a sales financial model, I use a ChatGPT for that. Or Perplexity, I use their deep research feature. For example, for when I need like access to what links they actually reference. They give you essentially paper with references to the links which they accessed, so you can clearly see what information was used to build the research report. And usually it looks like hundreds of sources, which is like in minutes, which is a lot better than what you'd be able to do just being at the library looking through books or even online, right? So it's that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm like, well, if you have this use case, you go to talk to this model, but if you have that one, actually this model is better. So it's kind of like the employer employee relationship that you're talking about.
Yeah. No, you're so true. So even with images, at one point it was like, if you want a good one, well, the best one, go to Midjourney, which is kind of more expensive. If not, then go to DALI, which got built into ChatGPT. But now it is like, hey, if you want something to do with images, then go to Google, Nano Banana first, Google, Gemini, and
Yeah.
then try something else. But if you want like photorealistic, then probably try Grok.
Oh,
So yeah, yeah.
I love that. Those are good hints to keep in mind as we look at images. I know Midjourney was expensive, so I used it a couple of times. I used Canva as well. Canva has now AI kind of built in, and you can modify images like with their pro account, and they do have pretty good features. But yeah, there's just so many options, and sometimes you just don't know. And to your point, like intuitively, like you just want to do AWS Bedrock because you want to learn that, and like it's hard to know everything about everything right at the same time. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was great. I learned so much. I know that our audience does as well. So thank you for spending the time
Thank you.
doing this today, Akshay. Thank
Glad
you.
to be here. Thank
It
you.
was a pleasure.